to do. My apologies. The Committee on Appropriations will now come to order, having established a quorum. To my far left, Councilwoman Sherelle Parker. To her right, Councilman Alan Dahm. To my left, immediate left, Councilwoman Blackwell. And nobody wants to sit on my other side. So for the purposes of the committee, we will begin with our budget director, Anna Adams. There was an amendment to Bill 181001, which has been circulated. I will make sure that Ms. Adams reviews the package, and then that we have representatives from various departments all available to add additionally to the amendments, or to the bill package. Mitchell Little from Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity, Carlton Williams from the Streets Department, the Fire Commissioner, David T. Jones from Behavioral Health, Catherine Lott Alvel, Bridget Collins Greenwald, Liz Hirsch, Rashida Johnson, Siobhan Reardon, Office of Property Assessment, Ben Haler from the Sheriff's Office, Chairwoman Lisa Dealey is here, the Honorable Heidi Fox from the courts, and someone from the Police Department. Actually, you guys have everybody. All right, every department is here, so let's make this quick. You can proceed, Anna.
So I actually didn't know which bill you wanted me to start with. So we have 4 bills, I believe. One is that we've got 2 related to the capital budget and program, and then we've got an FY18 year-end ordinance.
Let's do the capital one, because I think it's the simplest one, and then we can get to the operational department one.
Okay, and would you like me to read my whole testimony or just summarize?
You could summarize it, although
Okay.
there is quite a bit. I don't know, you may want to.
It's a lot to get through.
The bullets, yep.
So, good afternoon, Councilwoman Canary Sanchez and members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Anna Adams, and I serve as Budget Director.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have the clerk read the title of the bills. Councilwoman Blackwell was over here reminding me of protocol. My apologies.
Bill number 180999, an ordinance amending bill number 180162, approved June 21st, 2018, entitled An Ordinance to Adopt a Capital Program for the 6 fiscal years 2019 through 2024 inclusive. Bill number 181000, an ordinance amending bill number 180163A, approved June 21st, 2018, entitled An Ordinance to Adopt Fiscal 29 Capital Budget. Bill number 181001, an ordinance authorizing transfers and appropriations for fiscal year 2019 from the general fund, departments, boards, and commissions, the grants revenue fund, departments, boards, and commissions, the community development fund, departments, boards, and commissions to the general fund, departments, boards, and commissions, the water fund, departments, boards, and commissions, the aviation fund, department, boards, and commissions, the county liquid fuels fund, and the community development fund. Bill number 181002, an ordinance authorizing transfers and appropriations for fiscal year 2018 from the general fund, departments, boards, and commissions, grants revenue fund, department, boards, and commissions, the grants revenue fund, certain or all city offices, department, boards, and commissions, and the aviation fund to the general fund, and the aviation fund, department, boards, and commissions.
Thank you. You may proceed, Anne. I'm sorry.
So again, my name is Anna Adams. I'm the Budget Director. I have Sarah DeWolf, who's the Deputy Budget Director, with me today. We're here to offer testimony on 2 capital bills. Bills number 180999, which is a capital program amendment, as amended, and then 181000, which is the capital budget amendment. For bill number 180999, I respectfully request that the bill be amended to affix a technical issue where a funding line was intended to advance a payment for the Art Museum and not increase appropriations over the whole capital program. The bills amend the capital budget and the capital program to add $31.9 million in operating revenue appropriations in FY19, $500,000 in pre-finance loan CA appropriations, $835,000 in PICA pre-finance loans A appropriations, $22 million in state appropriations, and $22 million in federal appropriations, all in FY19. The bills also reduced the FY20 new loan CN appropriations by $5 million. These appropriations will allow us to pay for $30 million in important capital needs without incurring the cost of debt service, as funding is transferred from the general fund. $5 million would be an advance for the Art Museum's core project, so it would reduce the appropriation in FY20 to provide the same level of funding over the 6-year program as previously adopted. $2.5 million would be added in the Commerce Department for neighborhood commercial corridors. $22.5 million would be added for additional vehicles, mostly in the fire department and streets department, including additional pumpers, medic units, compactors, sweepers, and snow removal vehicles. The bills also increase appropriations for the Department of Public Property from a deposit made to the city from the parking authority, as well as from insurance proceeds. The amendments also increase appropriations for voting machines, adding federal and state appropriations, and add appropriations in state and federal lines for CNG vehicles. They add pre-finance loan and PICA pre-finance loan appropriations for the fire department, and allow them to return appropriations back for liquidated purchase orders. I respectfully request that you report these bills as amended out of committee with a favorable recommendation, and I further request that the rules of council be suspended so as to permit first reading at the next session of council. And we have representatives from the departments here to answer any questions.
Thank you. The chair recognizes that both Councilman David O. and the vice chair of this committee, Councilman Kenyatta Johnson, are present. Just a point of clarification with the capital budget. You are switching out general operating funds or moving some of your capital funds to general operating funds?
So what we're doing in the year-end ordinance, which you have it before you, we are transferring $30 million from the general fund to the capital budget so we don't have to pay debt service. So typically the capital budget for most of our appropriations, we borrow money. We decided that we would use some of our general fund to transfer into the capital budget so as to we could avoid debt service on that $30 million. And that's what this allows us to do.
So operationally, we've been talking about moving many of our operations that is in our capital budget funding. Why didn't we do that instead?
Sorry, instead of doing...
So we have staffing,
Yes.
operating staff that is in our capital budget.
Yes.
That we have been moving, that you have told me is going to take us several years.
Yes.
To do so. Why didn't we do that in lieu of this?
Oh, we are doing that still. So so you'll see in the FY20 budget, a lot of the personnel that were previously on the budget for the capital budget are now are moving to the operating budget. This is just on the general fund. Probably the most challenging department to do that with is with the water department, and that will take a few more years because they have a lot of personnel that are funded on the capital budget, and transferring all at once would be really challenging for them. But for most of the other departments, the personnel is being transferred as soon as we can. And so you'll see that in the FY20, a lot of the IT positions, that's probably where the biggest change will be in the FY20 budget. They'll be on the operating budget.
When you say a lot, what percentage is this 30 million?
I can get you how many positions are funded now, and then how many will be funded in FY20, and you'll see there's very few on the sort of general obligation side.
Okay, so the expectation is that by the end of this fiscal year, every single department that has operating folks in our capital budget will be in general operating, except for the water fund. But
just to clarify, these are positions that are funded out of the capital budget that we would like to not fund anymore. We don't want to have to pay debt service to fund personnel, and so we're moving them over. So now we'll have to increase the appropriations for the in the general fund to pay for these positions. And we can get you exactly how many will be remaining. There will be very few remaining, is our intention anyway.
And it will only be in the water department by the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, that's what I want to make sure. I'll get you exactly how many are remaining over the next, or at least over the next 2 years, I think it will be all of them other than the water department.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on the capital budget? You want to, okay. Councilwoman Blackwell?
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask one question with regard to 180,999, and that is about the neighborhood corridors.
Yes.
We've been asking for some time to double the money that we get to clean neighborhood corridors. We have organizations, NACs and so forth, who clean them, and they're dirty the night they clean them, because 2 or 3 days a week and picking up trash won't do it. If we want to make a difference on our neighborhood corridors, we have to increase the funding. I've been requesting that they double it, and I want to know for you to explain what we have here and what could the status of that request be.
So this is the capital component, and so this is kind of the larger scale commercial corridor project. It doesn't include kind of the day-to-day operations that related to cleaning of a neighborhood commercial corridor that would be funded in the operating budget. But we do have some people from the Commerce Department here who could talk about some of the larger commercial corridor projects. And then on the operating side, I think we should agree with you. There is a need to provide additional cleaning, and so I think that's something that we should be looking on the operating side.
So can we have someone from Commerce? Because I know we have quite a bit of what we're doing on the commercial corridors requires capital work, and so our ability to manage the operating side is tied into our capital. So can someone quickly answer my councilwoman's?
Thanks.
I also want to recognize Councilman Heenan is also here.
Hello, Karen Fegley, Deputy Commerce Director.
Edward Garcia, Deputy Commerce Director.
So how much of this capital transfer is for commercial corridors?
The additional $2.5 million coming into capital will all go towards our neighborhood commercial corridor streetscape projects.
And those projects have been identified?
Yes.
Okay. Does it address the councilwoman's concern with the corridor?
This funding will not pay, cannot pay for the cleaning services.
Mm-hmm.
So it complements them when we can put in new sidewalks and put out new trash cans that we can do with capital dollars. But this does not affect the amount of money that we put into actual corridor cleaning, the sidewalk sweeping services. So that's funded out of operational budget. And I do know that you've requested more.
Yes, I'm always talking about this. I hope that those of you who deal with this issue will keep in mind budgets come quickly. We'll be coming at you again, and we do need an increase in funding for cleaning our commercial corridors. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Noted.
Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few questions for you. I noticed that there's, if I'm reading it correctly, and I'm on the right bill, that's number 2, $22.5 million is added for additional vehicles for the fire department, streets, pumpers, medic units, compactors, and it says sweepers.
Yes.
Is there a plan to do more street sweeping in the city?
These are mostly to replace the vehicles that needed to be replaced. So this is just about, I believe there are 3 street sweepers which are replacing those that fleet called relinquished without replacement. So this is where a vehicle is no longer something they just need to replace that vehicle. So this is just about kind of improving the existing fleet. It's not necessarily an expansion of services.
And so while we're talking about street sweeping, and I'm a fan of sweeping the streets, do you have any estimate what it might cost us as a city to actually enact street sweeping?
I can get that to you. I don't have it off the top.
Okay.
Can we have somebody from the streets department come up so we can talk about this vehicle? Because I think some of it is tied into that.
And Madam Chair, may I also note, we could use them fixing those holes when they're cleaning the streets too. You know, we usually try to get the winter holes done in the spring, but it didn't happen. We still have holes, and we still need a program so that no matter who you are, whether you're water department, whether you're gas, when you start a street, don't forget it. Come back and fix those holes you leave. We get calls all the time or ride by our neighborhood. So we would like to see this as part of your priority as well. Thank you.
Thank you. For the streets department, Councilman Dom wants to know, do we have any capacity right now to do any piloting on street cleaning based on our vehicle?
We would need additional funding to increase our street sweeping operation. At a short scale, it would be over $2 million. At a large scale, it would be over $4 million.
$4 million?
Yes.
What would the annual cost be, though, if we wanted to enact it, including the labor?
It would be at least $2 million
That's it?
in terms of operating.
So if we wanted to enact street sweeping across the city on an annual basis, including the cost of the equipment, the cost of the labor, all expenses, what do you think the number would be?
Councilman Don, we do have that number. I can get that for you. If it's across the city, on a citywide basis, it's much more than that, yes.
But I would make a point that I'm in favor of it because I actually think it would help the city dramatically and help the cleanliness of the city, help the values of the city, and raise people's levels of how they lifestyle.
Yes.
So I'm going to be on this topic, but I think we should consider doing it citywide.
The Streets Department agrees, and we are going to be asking for more money in the FY20 operating budget for that purpose.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam
What
Chair.
is our current capacity? Do we have the capacity to do any enhanced services before the FY '20?
Our sanitation division is looking to see how we can implement operating efficiencies to increase some street cleaning. But in terms of any significant changes, it would actually, we'd have to increase the budget for doing that.
Okay. Add to the councilman's request for that information. What exactly would it take if we did pilots just in commercial corridors? And do we have the current capacity to do that in this fiscal year?
Well, that's why I said, on a short scale, which would be a pilot scale, we're talking about $2 million.
Okay,
That's where the
thank
$2 million comes from.
Did you want to get on something on the record, Councilman? I asked that if we have the vehicle capacity to do a pilot cleaning on all commercial corridors right now, and what would that cost? Did you want to add anything to that, Councilwoman?
I just want to state for the record, I'm, really excited to hear so much interest, because obviously these commercial corridors, obviously it's been my number one priority as a district council person. But I want us to note for the record that when we talk about staffing, it is about capacity and supporting neighborhood-based organizations who can actually do the direct hiring for us relative to simply just increasing the workload that our Philadelphia employees have. And I just want to state for the record, Councilwoman Blackwell, I'm with you 1,001%. And, when we come down to Center City, and we see the Center City District ambassadors constantly sweeping and constantly cleaning, people do begin to question, why is this not in my neighborhood? So to come up with a citywide strategy to do it is one that I would welcome, but I also know that we need to come up with the citywide revenue to pay for it, those costs. So I'm definitely interested in working with my colleagues to do that.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Kenyatta Johnson.
Yeah, I just want to add to my colleagues' comments regarding the importance of street sweeping, but most importantly, having the political will to get it done. I mean, at the end of the day, some of the comments I've heard from the administration was that people didn't want to move their cars. And for me, that's an act of political will from the administration and the city to make sure that we can have block parties and people move their cars, then surely they can move their cars to clean the streets. I mean, it's just that simple. Part of the zero litter campaign that's promoted by the administration, this should also be a part of that. Part of actually going into the budget process, it should already have something have been set aside for us to follow up doing it, and at least good faith efforts starting with commercial quarters first and foremost. If I remember correctly, that was part of the platform that was expressed in terms of what are the things that will be accomplished under this new administration going into 2019. I think it's time to really show the people that this is a priority moving forward. Because I hear about it all throughout my district. And again, the debate comes down to me, it's not a money thing. It's about saying, listen, on certain days you have to move your cars and we're going to have street sweeping. It's just that real simple. People don't want to move their cars, you get tickets. That's it. And we do it for block parties, we do it for festivals. We can approach that same type of, we can use the same type of will and make sure that if a neighborhood is designated for street cleaning, same thing we do for block parties and street festivals, same thing we can do when it comes to street cleaning. That's all. I just want to say that for the record, because it's something that we've been working on with our Clean and Green initiative. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and I think everyone is clear that we appreciate our partners on the ground, particularly those in the commercial corridor. And I agree with my colleagues. I mean, I think the issue of political will, and again, pushing the pilots around commercial corridors, and this notion, when I go to other cities, that we can't get that done at night, right? When people are sleeping, so that we're not disrupting people, particularly in commercial corridors where you don't have as much residential density, is important for us to consider. So thank you to the Streets Department. We're going to move on to the 2018.
Christopher Newman, Deputy Commissioner for Administration,
Hold on.
Streets Department.
Councilman Don has another question.
I got a few more, but I'll be quick. On the Art Museum, if I read this correctly, our project over 6 years is about $33 million, I think.
Yeah, it's about
Ballpark.
32 and a half, yep.
My only comment is that I know we've studied it for years, the conversion to PGW at the Art Museum. It was a $20 million, the last time I saw it, investment for a $2 million savings. That's a better return than any other investment right now in the pension fund. That's a 10% return. So my point is that in the next year or so, can we revisit that issue and see how, and by the way, we own PGW, and just to give you the quick math, if we generate $2 million of net income to our own entity at a 5 cap, sounds like it's worth $40 million of value just to PGW. I mean, it makes sense to me for us to look at this opportunity.
Yeah, I'll follow up and find out whether anybody's re-looked at that.
I have one other question, but it may not be for this, but might be it's on the voting machines. I noticed we're authorizing $20 million for voting machines.
Just appropriations, yes.
Okay. And I'm in favor of people voting, just for the record.
I think we all are.
Yeah. But I was listening, I don't know where I saw it. Are there 3 states right now that are actually voting on the internet or electronically?
I think someone from the city
Commissioner's
commission
office?
said they could
Madam
answer
Chairwoman?
that. That's not mine.
And so, and then my question is that something that we should be looking into down the road that might save us some money and also encourage more voters? Because the internet's here to stay, it's not going away.
Yeah, and it's not my subject matter area, and so I would defer to the city commissioner's office if someone, to answer that.
Good afternoon. Lisa Dealey, Chairwoman, City Commissioner's Office. As far as online voting, we're a long way to go. We would need both federal and state legislation to even get anywhere near there. But what we're talking about now is a verifiable paper trail, which is the first step.
Are any states doing online voting right now?
I don't believe any are doing online voting.
Okay. I just want to put it on the radar because it's coming.
Yeah.
And what does the 20 million allow you to do for now? Because I know it's a lot more than that.
The $20 million, well, we couldn't even do the training component at that number.
So, Anna, can you explain what the current allocation does?
So we have 22 million that was already approved in the FY20 capital program. This is adding 20 million both of federal and state appropriations. We're hoping, and we heard from, at least I read in the articles, that the state is looking to contribute significantly to our voting machine project. So these are placeholders in case we get federal or state grants that we could use towards our voting machine project. We know that the cost is going to be considerable, and so we just wanted to make sure that we had appropriations in case we were lucky enough to get some grants.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Chairwoman. We'll move to the fiscal 18 closeout transfer ordinance.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So this is Bill number 18-1002, which is the FY18 year-end transfer ordinance. So it provides for a transfer within the general fund of $5.1 million, the grants revenue fund, $44.5 million, and the aviation fund. These are needed to transfer appropriations to those agencies and expenditure classes where shortages have occurred, will allow the proper recording of final FY18 obligations. It's required for our year-end closing of the financial records of the city. And I could list each of them. It's all in my testimony. Each of them is laid out in my testimony, and then there is backup from each of the departments, explaining them in more detail. I'll just highlight some of the more significant ones. The $30 million that we've already talked about, this is a payment from the Director of Finance into the capital fund, which we referred to in the previous bill. There is $4.7 million to the First Judicial District. This is to appropriate funds per the Zero Growth Agreement, and they provided testimony, and they're also here if there are any questions. And then there are some transfers to fully fund payroll costs in fire and streets and a variety of other departments, and those are probably the more significant ones. I respectfully request that you report this bill out of committee with a favorable recommendation, and I further request that the rules of council be suspended so as to permit first reading at the next session of council. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
So real quickly, the $9 million to fully fund payroll costs, that is mostly because of the settlement of the contract, or?
It's a little bit of both. So there
And the
was...
closure addresses more of the closure, the firehouse closure?
Sorry?
Does it address more any of the firehouse closures? The
Sorry.
Firehouse,
This is related to additional costs that are happening in the fire department. Some of that could be because we are no longer brand out companies, but most of this is related to the contract and then just additional costs in the fire department.
Okay. And as I've done every year, I've always questioned the Zero Growth Agreement. I know it's a long-term agreement with the city,
Yes.
and there's been discussions about revisiting that because essentially every year we do this transfer. This year in particular is quite significant, so I'm going to put that on the record again.
I understand.
Thank you. Any questions, Councilman Don?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. You know how to ask a question. Yeah.
Yes.
I want to talk about the beverage tax for a minute. It was passed in 16. I think we started collecting the revenue in 17.
Yeah, January.
Do you know how much we collected for the whole year, 2017, the actual number?
The calendar year?
Ballpark, yes.
I can tell you for the fiscal year, actually can tell you the actual that we collected.
I guess what I'm looking
in
to,
FY18.
for the year from today, going back to when we enacted the beverage tax, how much total money did we collect?
So give me a second, and I can, so in FY18, we collected 77.4 million. In the first quarter, we collected almost 13 million, first quarter of FY19. And then I don't have the FY17, but it was...
Are those monies put into the general fund? Or
Yes, they all go into the general fund.
So when we heard this surplus earlier, weeks or months ago, whatever it was, maybe a few weeks ago, was that because of the beverage tax that's sitting in that account?
So when you talk about are you talking about the FY18 fund
Surplus,
balance?
yes, fund balance.
So our fund balance came in higher for a variety of reasons, including that our revenues came in above projection. The beverage tax came in around where we projected, so I wouldn't say the increase in the fund balance was related to the beverage tax. It was more related to other revenues. Our real estate transfer tax came in stronger, and a variety of other revenues, as well as we had fewer expenditures than we had projected. And those were a larger component than anything related to the beverage.
But then explain this to me, because I'm not sure I understand. If we've collected, just in the numbers you just gave me, about $90 million, okay, how much of that did we invest or spend so far?
So I can get you, if it would be helpful, I can get you a table which shows you kind of the revenues coming in and then our expenditures going out related to beverage tax related expenditures, and you can see the difference.
But let me give you an example. Let's say we spent $30 million so far, and we collected 90. Wouldn't that mean that we have a $60 million positive in the fund as of right now?
So it doesn't quite work like that. So all of the revenues flow into the general fund, and from there we're making expenditures. The beverage tax doesn't flow into a separate fund where we're making expenditures out of. It's all going into the same pot. But we can tell you of that, like how much are we spending on programs that were related to the beverage tax.
But I guess where I'm heading with this is because of the litigation that occurred.
Yes.
And because we were cautious, which was the right thing to do, not to spend the money right away to see where the litigation
Not
would
all
end
of the
up.
funding. Yeah, we slowed down some of the
There should be a
expenditures.
surplus that occurred from that
Yeah, and actually, that's why I think the table would be helpful, because then you can see that in one of the FY19 ordinances, we're actually releasing that reserve that we had projected that we were going to start spending in FY20. We're actually releasing that in FY19 to allow us to expand some of those programs like pre-K supports and additional slots, because the litigation was resolved in our favor much earlier than we'd anticipated. And so I think seeing it over a few years would just adds a little extra clarity. By FY22, I think we're actually spending more on the programs than the expected revenue that we're bringing in, but over a few years it kind of evens itself out, and then it
As of today, I don't know if you know this number, how many young children are in pre-K from this program?
I just want to check to see if someone else from the Mayor's Office of Education is not, they're not here, but I can get you that. I don't know off the top of my head.
All right.
I know that we are expanding the number of slots, but I just don't know at the top of my head how many.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just to add to that, I would hope that the administration could give us a full analysis on not only the number of slots. Some people would say we hoarded that money, right? And so we'd like to see how the rollout plan has been realigned, right? And then how much will go into an area that we all pushed for, which was training and capacity building for providers.
Yes, and we can get you exactly the breakdown of how the reserve funds are being spent, as well as just the general, the regular budget, and we can break that out into sections for you, seeing the pre-K supports, the teaching, the quality improvement, as well as just the number of slots. We can get that broken out.
Okay, because the number of slots went from 6,500 to 5,500, as you explained, all the way when you get to 2022.
Yes.
So that's a significant reduction
That was,
of the first plan.
yes. That was due to a reduction in the revenues that were originally, if you remember, we assumed the revenues were going to generate about 92 million, and they came in around the 78 million mark, and so we scaled back the programs by about the same proportion so that we weren't overspending relative to the amount of revenue that was being generated.
Okay. Councilman Don?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick one. You said in the first quarter of 18 fiscal, we had 13...
FY19. Sorry,
FY19, we had $13 million for the quarter? Would that mean, from an extrapolation standpoint, you multiply that by 4, that would be the annual?
It doesn't quite work like that. I mean, there are seasonal adjustments, and we're still learning a lot about this tax, so it doesn't quite, you can't really just use that first
Okay.
It would be the same as many of our other taxes. There are some spikes. Apparently, Easter weekend is a really big weekend to buy soda, and so we're learning a little bit about the tax and how it works, so I wouldn't use that.
What is your expectation?
So our projection, let me just get that for you. We have that in our latest quarterly report. So our projection for the beverage tax is going to be 76.6 million. We'd originally assumed 78 million, so a little bit below our projection, but not by much.
So what was the first quarter number in fiscal year 18?
Fiscal year 18, I don't have that.
Because that would be the comparison to fiscal year 19.
Yes, although there's some interesting timings. Sometimes when, as the revenue department is learning more of that, the tax, there's sometimes where someone makes a catch-up payment or there's a delayed payment, and so just the cash doesn't actually always help us fully understand it. So there's, yes, theoretically, but there is always a little bit of a wiggle room that we just need to look at.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am.
How much money are we spending or investing to monitor this program? Has there been any enforcement action?
Sorry, enforcing the beverage tax?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the revenue department enforces the revenue.
So how much are we spending in enforcement?
I don't know whether anybody from the revenue department is here, but if they're not, I can just get you the exact, the amount that they're spending on auditing. Yes, we'll get you that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions related to fiscal year 18 closures? Seeing none, let's move over to our current appropriations for 2019. And I know on this one, we have an amendment. You want to testify on the record?
Yeah, so the amendment adds an additional 5.1 million, and we are in favor of that. I believe you should have also got additional testimony in regards to that. That is related to the Project Resilience, which is fighting the opioid epidemic. And so that's something that we are in support of that amendment. And so Bill 18-1001 does a few things. One is related to labor costs, and you'll see in my testimony there is a chart which shows the breakdown by department and related to each of the different labor categories. DC 47 are non-reps, exempt, or local 810, and any fringe benefits that are associated, and these are to make sure that the departments have the right amount of funding, and you can see that's $21.3 million in total for the general fund. And then there are other areas being addressed in this ordinance. I won't go through each of them out of interest of time. One thing just to note to both council people's point, we're adding $4.6 million to the Mayor's Office of Education for contracted services and pre-K expansion. That's related to the fact that the litigation was resolved in our favor, and we'd like to expand the number of pre-K slots and supports. We'd previously assumed that would not be able to take place until FY20, and so we're pleasantly surprised and pleased that we're able to advance that forward. There are about $2.9 million for the Managing Director's Office, and that is for a variety of projects, and I see they're listed here. They're both personnel related as well as contract related. And then additional funding for the Defenders Association of $700,000, 4.7 for Streets Department. One significant portion of that is about $3 million for an additional cost related to recycling rates for disposal. 16.7 million for the Fire Department. Of that, 8.3 is related to the restoration of the payment to the Water Fund. We had previously anticipated that the Water Fund would pay for fire suppression services, and in the most recent rate board case, it wasn't found that we could do that, and so that is now back into the general fund. And that's,
Can you explain that a little bit? So, can you explain that a little bit? The restoration of $8.2 million to the water fund.
Yes, so we had, so there is about $8 million, thank you, $8 million that we had, that is the cost of water that is in the fire department's budget. We had assumed that could be paid for out of the water fund. And when it went to the rate board as part of the rate board case, the rate board found that that was a general fund cost, not a water fund cost, and so we have moved it into the general fund based on that, based on the water rate case. And I'd included that answer in my question to you earlier.
Okay, so I guess my question is, and I've asked this question for years, fires are down, why does this water amount to the fire department go up so high?
This is the basis of the cost of when the fire department is fighting fires. This is related to the cost when they go and access water from.
Yeah, but we don't have meters on our fire hydrants, so we don't know how much water it's being expended. I just think this number has been a moving target for years. And so I want to know why the fire department is responsible for 8.25 for the water department. How are we calculating that?
I don't know whether
Our fire department needs tons of money. We're spending years here restoring them.
Yeah.
I don't know whether anybody from the water fund is here. We'll get back to you, Councilwoman. I'm not sure of the technicality of how they calculate the cost of this, but I'm sure that they have a way of calculating it.
We've asked that on the record. If we don't have metered fire hydrants, this number keeps just growing. It's a moving target.
I'll find out how that works.
Okay, go ahead, continue.
And then there's related to the firefighter bonuses per the IAFF award, as well as costs for training, medical supplies, and cleaning and repair of bunker equipment. Additional costs for behavioral health and homeless services, and that's also added to with the amendments that we've included today. Additional funds, other significant funds are related to the Director of Commerce, a transfer from the PIDC. So previously there were employees on PIDC's payroll that were paid for through a contract with PIDC, and those employees are now going to become city employees, and they're going to be under the Director of Commerce.
Would the adjustment be made in our check to the PIDC accordingly?
Yes, so that will go down. So it's basically a neutral transfer. So instead of it being a contracted cost, that will be a personnel cost. And so the contract with PIDC will go down.
Is that going to come out of general operating or CDBG?
General operating. This is based on the Department of Commerce's payment through the Economic Stimulus Fund, and it will go down.
Okay.
The other significant one is $21.4 million to payment to other funds. This is the 1.4, which I already mentioned, which is in the capital budget. This is related to the parking authority gave us some revenue. We are then transferring that money to the capital budget to the Department of Public Property. And then there's also a $20 million request to be made for a future payment to the Budget Stabilization Reserve.
And I know you're going to expect me to ask you to define that and explain it.
Yes, so this is the rainy day fund. We would like to be able to put aside money that we can make a future payment into the rainy day fund. Technically, under the city charter, we are unable to make that payment outside of the budget process. We would like to change that, and I believe that we have transmitted some legislation that would allow us to make a payment. We'd have to go get a charter change to allow us to make a payment outside of that process. But this would allow us to put money to set aside, so if that charter change was voted favorably by the voters, we would be able to make a $20 million payment into the Budget Stabilization Reserve Fund for the first time.
And if not?
If not, then that would actually just fall to fund balance, but it would allow us to kind of set aside that funding ready, and then we would be able to appropriate it in the FY20 budget. So I think during the FY20 budget process, we would like to show money put money aside in the rainy day fund, but this would allow us to be able to make that payment in FY19 if we could.
So when you move it for purposes of the balance sheet, since everybody is looking at our fund balance, in putting it in this temporary rainy day fund, because we don't have authorization to do so, would then you remove that from our fund balance?
So it basically lowers our fund balance, but it shows that it's spent, so our fund balance is lowered by $20 million.
You have a question about that, Councilman Dahl?
In general, yes.
In general, or on this particular, before she moves on to the other ones?
I have a question on this.
Go ahead, Councilman Dahl.
What is the dollar figure right now for the fund balance?
So in our latest projection, in our quarterly report, we are assuming that we're going to end FY19 at $248.4 million.
248. And the bond rating companies, what do they usually like to see us? Is it between 6 and 8% of annual?
Yeah, they would like us to be, that's our internal target, is 6 to 8%. They would like us to be closer to 16%.
16?
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, that's impossible.
So we are way below, well, other cities manage it, but we have not yet
So
managed it.
this now puts us, what, at 5%?
At 5.3%, yes.
Is that including after that rainy day fund?
Yes.
And what's the projection for next year?
We're going through that process now. We're looking at all that. So one of the things that we do when we build the FY20 budget is get the fixed costs. So we are getting all those fixed costs they would do to us on Friday. So we're going through that process now to understand what that means for FY20, and then we'll obviously look at all of our revenues to come up with a base budget. We don't have that yet. It'd be a little soon for us to come up with something. Yeah.
Do you think the rainy day fund is a better use of the money than applying it to our underfunded pension?
Well, that was part of we made an additional pension payment in FY18 because we recognize that that's a significant challenge for us too. And so this is where we're trying to do a little bit of both, honestly. I think we'd like to contribute as much as we can to the pension fund, knowing that's one of our biggest financial challenges, but we also are recognizing that we're in a situation where our revenues are coming in above where we had projected, at least for FY18, which is the time of sort of economic growth. This is the time to put money into a rainy day fund if we can, because we know that this won't continue forever. And so this is the balance we're in. So we would like to set aside $20 million so we could make a payment into the rainy day fund while we can, because we know at some point we're going to have a recession.
Let me ask you another question on that. Would it make more sense, instead of putting it to the pension or the rainy day fund, to take whatever those dollars are, 40, 50, 60 million dollars, and reinvest it into figuring out how to make our tax structure more approachable for growing existing businesses and attracting new ones?
When you say we would invest 50, 60, I don't know.
In other words,
what
use
that kind of investment
use those dollars to figure out which tax we are currently, that's inhibiting our ability to
Yeah.
grow existing businesses and bring in new businesses.
And I think a lot of the tax reform commissions have looked at our array of taxes, and I think that's why the administration has remained committed to wage and business tax reform. I think finding that balance is really critical. It is a balance. It's a complete trade-off between all of those things.
Right.
Pension payments, rainy day fund, reducing tax rates, investing in critical infrastructure, and, street sweeping. All of those things that we've been talking about today is a really difficult balance, and we're trying to get that balance right. I think that's why we're showing a $20 million investment. We haven't yet put any funding in a rainy day fund, and I think it's something that we should be doing. Finding that balance, though, between all those other critical needs, including probably further wage and business tax reductions, is something that we're trying to balance and get those things right.
I guess my point is if we could figure it out, I'm not sure what the answer is yet, but if we could figure out how to grow our jobs a lot greater of the existing businesses and attract new ones, we may not need that rainy day as quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that, as a bit of a preview for the FY20 budget, but I think investing in our workforce is going to be is one of our goals. And what are we doing about equitable growth, and how can we ensure that we are developing our workforce in the way that we can improve the economic opportunities for all of our residents? It's a really significant goal of ours, and so we're just trying to find the right avenue to do so, and how we can understand the impact of what we're trying to do, and that's something I think we'll be focusing on in the FY20 budget.
You're right. In some ways, taking that $20 million and reinvesting it for those people who are currently in poverty and training them to get jobs to come out of poverty is a much better investment.
And I think, honestly, this is where we go to many different challenges. We have short-term, medium-term, and long-term challenges that we're trying to affect in multiple ways. And last year, our significant investment in the school district was also related to poverty, long-term challenges, investing in our workforce. And we're trying to get that balance right between all of those things. But we also know that I was here during the recession in 2008, 2009, and when we had to make severe cuts to our city services as well as raise taxes. And that was a very difficult and horrible position to be in, and very unsettling for our residents who highly depend on our services. And so having some money set aside in a rainy day fund, I think, is really critical to add stability. And when we have such high poverty, when people are dependent on our services, and if we have to raise taxes to pay for things, or we have to cut services, I think it's a real challenge for our residents. And so finding a way to provide stability is, I think, also really important to our residents.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. I will add that, and I'm glad that Councilman Dom recognizes this, and we have quite a bit of a poverty challenge, and we have quite a few investments that we make, because when we invest in long-term poor residents, it's an investment also,
Yes.
not just business tax cuts. I would add that as part of that assessment about, because I think we have a very generous tax reduction package in our 5-year plan, what other investments could we make to limit the issues around poverty and cost to the other parts of our system? So as we're looking forward for next year's budget, how many of the savings or investments are we making into poverty situations that help, again, short-term will cost us something, but long-term, we're not depleting other resources in the department. That kind of assessment would be also very helpful. Because if I asked you the question today, of all of these transfers, how many of these deal with quality of life poverty issues, or some of the issues that we talked about, streets, all those other things, could we answer that directly? And
I think we could. I mean, I'd have to go line by line, but I think we did. I think the lens, the challenge of poverty is a lens that many of our departments look through as they make requests to us, and not just the departments that kind of offer direct services, not just like Department of Homeless, of Supportive Housing or Homeless Services. It affects many departments in many different ways. I mean, you can think about L&I, the work that L&I does. Anything that they're focusing on demolitions is also related to poverty. Part of it is that the kind of the poverty and neglect in our city goes hand in hand. So for many of the departments, fire department included, the the poverty affects almost everything that we do as a city, and so alleviating poverty and growing our residents, the economic opportunities of our residents is really, really important to almost for every service that we're offering as a city. And so it permeates through everything, and I think finding ways that we can tackle it is really important.
And that's why blight and the streets
Absolutely.
component that we're talking about is hugely important. Every data
Agreed.
set, evidence-based data set shows us that cleanliness, stabilization of vacant land, all of those lead to savings in our public safety component, right? And
No, I
so,
agree.
looking at those blight issues in a critical way around not only land value, right, but assessment value, and crime and safety and our first responders is hugely important.
Yes.
So we have a couple more quickly, the Board of Revisions of Taxes and,
Yeah, I mean, unless you want me to go through, and then there's the water fund, which is related also to the labor costs, Aviation Fund, and County Liquid Fuels and Community Development Fund, unless you want me to list each of them.
no, I just want to ask the question again, the water fund salary piece, this is because of our continuing having operating folks on the water fund. When we eliminate those with this,
This is their operating budget. This is the water
oh, this
fund's
is their
operating
water
budget.
fund operating.
So
But
they
in
will
here,
always be
it says, it speaks to the accommodation of payroll and fringe benefit costs attributed to DC 47.
Yes,
That's
right.
staff.
Yes, on the water fund. So this is the water fund has water operating revenues, and water fund has operating costs and capital costs. What we're talking about is moving, they would still remain in the water fund no matter what, whether they were on the capital budget or the operating budget. This is, eventually we'd like to move more into this operating component, but they would still always remain in the water fund. We wouldn't transfer them to the general fund.
Okay. All right, you said aviation, what else?
And
we have here?
aviation, and then these are just.
And then this county fuel, the $2 million for the streets department, is that to pre-purchase fuel?
I think Chris can answer that question. I
The
don't think
fuels
it's-
tax fund?
That actually is to increase our title registration fee amount by $2 million because of public works projects that were deferred to this fiscal year,
Excuse
from
me,
last fiscal year.
that is for expenditures under Act 89, title registration fees for,
For public works projects that we deferred from last fiscal year to this fiscal year,
is that because of money or time or?
because of time. Yeah, PennDOT has given us a bridge match of $1 million for $1 million that we can use for bridges, and the bridge project is moving to this year as opposed to last year.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Would I be able to just I want to make sure I've said it on the record. Sorry, I just want to make sure I've said on the record that we respectfully request that you report this bill out of committee with a favorable recommendation and further request that the rules of council be suspended as to permit first reading in the next session of council.
Councilman O has a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman. Is there a backlog of property assessment appeals of 7,000?
Sorry, you're asking whether the BRT has a backlog? I don't know whether Carla Pagan from the BRT is here.
I understand that residents have appealed their property assessments, that there are 7,000 appeals pending. Is that correct?
I can get you exactly the number of appeals are pending. I don't know how there's two components. There's a first level review with
Right.
the Office of
I'm
Property
talking about
Assessment.
second level.
You're talking about the direct appeals,
Direct
with the BRT. I can get you the exact number. I don't know.
And what is the estimate of what the city would have to pay back?
So in our, we build losses into our revenue projections, and it varies whether it's a commercial property or a residential property, and we can get you that breakdown about what we've assumed in terms of loss of revenue. We don't do it by percentage or the number of appeals. We do it
Do you have
based
a
on.
general Do
I
you
can
or
give you that.
someone have a general idea of what that number is?
We can give you the breakdown. I think it's easier if I can give you a breakdown, and we can give you the dollar amount that we assume in our 5-year plan by the amount of revenue, and I'll send you that. I'm gonna put it in a little table. I think it makes it easier to understand. But we
Okay.
assume a loss. We assume
Is
an
that
appeals
loss
into our-
over $20 million?
I don't know at the top of my head.
No idea?
Pardon?
Nobody here has an idea of what that is, estimate?
No, I think we would like to get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, to address the amendment, I know that we have testimony here by Tumar Alexander. I don't know if he wants to come forward if there are any questions, but I do want to ask him something on the record.
I believe he's here.
Tumar and Noel have taken on the task of this Philadelphia Resilience Project. And there is, Councilman Squilla and I have been working with the administration, and there is a $5 million transfer amendment here to address some of the issues of some of the commitments that the mayor has made as it relates to a citywide problem manifesting itself in Kensington. So, Tumar, you want to just brief highlights? We have your testimony here for the record.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Timur Alexander, Director of Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs for the Office of the Managing Director. I'll summarize the testimony just to say that on October the 3rd, Mayor Kenney signed an executive order creating an opioid emergency response group. This effort, termed Philadelphia Resilience Project, has brought together 35 city and external departments, agencies, and officers to focus on tackling the opioid crisis in Philadelphia. The additional funding, this funding will be used to support resilience project goals that include, but are not limited to, expanding police-assisted diversion in the East Police Division, supporting the Salvation Army's New Day program that helps victims of human trafficking, equipping first responders with smartphones in order to better track and map overdoses in real time, hiring additional parks and recreation seasonal maintenance workers to increase cleaning efforts at facilities, increasing naloxone training and distribution, increasing outreach efforts to engage people in treatment, and reducing the unsheltered population. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to share from my committee in the packet for the Appropriations Committee, at the request, the Department of Behavioral Health put together some heat maps that outline all of the services being provided directly dealing with the situation. And one of the things that I want to get on the record, I know many people have heard me publicly talk about NOMAS in Kensington. I need a commitment on the record that we are going to let this data be a driving force as to how we locate things. I know I'm waiting for data specific to where people who are on MAT, what districts they reside in, versus where they buy their drugs.
Yes.
And I need a commitment from the administration that you are committed to a very public process and discussion with residents anywhere we do additional services as it relates to placing them in people's communities.
You have that commitment from the administration, Councilwoman.
You have to say that clearer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know you're not used to being on that side of the
I'm
table.
not at all. You have that commitment from the administration, Councilwoman.
I appreciate that. Any questions from the administration? From my colleagues. Councilman Dom?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I have a question. The corridor of Kensington Avenue from Allegheny down to Lehigh, I go there every 2 weeks, just drive through, has been destroyed. Is there any plans to revitalize it and bring it back? Because I feel like the fact that we let this go on for so long, to a degree, we're at fault for destroying that neighborhood. Are there any plans that we can do to revitalize this, bring it back? I know it's not an opportunity zone, but what can we do as a city to restore that?
I can see if someone from Commerce would come up. I know they are participating members in our Emergency Operations Center, so we've been having some discussions about that. We've been having some discussions about how we could help with the 2 district council persons to help start that plan, and actually some of those plans may already be in process.
Some of them are 4 years behind schedule.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Sylvie Gallier Howard, First Deputy Commerce Director. I have not been involved directly in those conversations. I know that Karen Fagley, Lauren Cox, and some other representatives from Commerce have been involved. So I can't speak specifically to the details, but I know that we're committed to revitalizing that corridor, and would be happy to get back to you with further details.
I'm going to give you an idea to think about, and we should pay for it. We should create a special services district in that area that we pay for, okay? And provide additional street sweeping, cleaning, because we have destroyed a neighborhood. We have destroyed it. It's not right. And we should be responsible to bring it back once it gets to a certain level, let the commercial property owners take on the cost. But we need to bring it back. You need to have cameras under the L that would stop all this drug dealing. And we need to take responsibility and bring it back. So I'm just throwing out that as an idea. I don't know if it's feasible, but I'll leave it up to you to see if it is. Thank you.
It's feasible, Councilman, and that's some of the, what Councilwoman Sanchez says is it's a little overdue. That's some of the action plans that is overdue for that area.
My understanding is that this transfer ordinance adds to, there was money allocated 4 years ago for total fiber optics, LED lighting, and cameras along the corridor. That has been delayed, but this transfer addresses the gap in funding for us to get that done. It was originally scheduled for Frankfurt and Kensington and Allegheny, and now it will go throughout the entire FT Center to Spring Gardens, so that is here. We have been engaging SEPTA in many conversations, and I think they finally are putting an RFP to complement some of our street cleaning, but it's still not enough, which is why I think the issue of piloting cleanups along the commercial corridors becomes hugely important, because it should be done all over the city, but it definitely should be done daily. In Kensington, having 700 people occupying Kensington, and 30,000 people being moved through SEPTA at Kensington and Allegheny is quite a bit to handle. And some of those things are being addressed as we speak around the trash situation. But the trash one is huge, and I don't even think with the SEPTA, with our increase in trash cleanup, if that's even going to be enough in the interim. I hope that through the Resilience Project and the fact that we have a deadline looming that the mayor established of December 31st, we will have a more comprehensive plan about how we can manage it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from our panel? Councilwoman Parker?
No, Madam Chair, this is just a point of information to follow up on Councilman Dom's and your comments early on about the funding via the beverage tax and the funding for pre-K. And I just wanted to note for the record, because as you just mentioned, the data and the actual evidence of progress is extremely important. And I just held a meeting 2 weeks ago with our commercial and home-based providers, and they asked the very same questions, Councilman Dom, that you asked, and we had to provide the data. They wanted to know the total number of centers. That answer was 88, and this is citywide relative to PHL pre-K, and this is an enrollment update as of October 2018. Total slots that were allocated were 2,234 slots. Total slots filled, that was 2,063, and that gives us a 92.3% fill rate, and then it goes on to tell us how many of those are in what categories relative to the stars. So there's 1 star, 1 5, 145, and 136. And although Otis Hackney is not here today, I do want us to note that when we do come back before council, the administration should be prepared to talk about how many of those are home-based versus how many of those are large commercial-based. But that data is important, and I'm sure the same data that I received relative to the 9th District, we would make sure that all of our council members, particularly the district members, receive that for their respective districts. Thank you.
2 more left before I finish. Man. So just 2 points as it relates to the Resilience Project, and I've said this over and over again. I want to put it in the record. 2 of the product lines that we have not been able to create and giving cash assistance coming back online, really need to look at what supports we can give recovery houses that are currently not funded by the city of Philadelphia, who, as I've always said, with a little bit of money, they might become adequate, not appropriate, adequate, to help us. There's probably 1,000 recovery houses in the city of Philadelphia, and we need to figure out a way how to support folks as cash assistance gets online in that market. I know we only fund about 25 of those, but there is a market of 1,000 recovery houses, and we need to get to support them. And the other product line that I think is hugely important, and I say this as someone who is, all of us are experiencing some issues with opioid addiction in our families, is what is it going to take and what kinds of supports we give families so they take their loved ones back. Again, we don't have a product line or a unit of service, whatever you guys want to call it, that we can help families do this. And it's very important in our messaging that, you know, we don't say to long-term residents in Kensington, until we find 700 housing units, we're not going to clean up Kensington. And so those are the two product lines. I keep putting it on the record, and I expect this allocation or this amendment to take us closer to that. Again, these are much more cost-effective than the $28,000 that it costs us per year for full services, or even the shallow rents, right? Of $12,000, whether it's $7,500 or $12,000 a year. The ability to get the folks in Kensington back home with some financial supports to family is hugely important, and ultimately, long-term, the most efficient and effective way to help people in their lifelong recovery efforts. So thank you very much. That's my spiel for that. So if there are no other questions, we will conclude the public hearing on the Committee of Appropriations and move to our public meeting. The chair will recognize Councilman Johnson for the motion on the amendment to Bill 180999 and 181001.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that bill number 180999 and 181000 as amended be reported from this committee with the favorable recommendation and
Oh, you have the wrong. Here it goes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that the amendment to bill number 180999 and 181001 be adopted.
All those in favor? Any opposition? Being none, the amendments to Bill 180999 and 181000 are adopted. The chair recognizes the councilman for a motion on all bills, including the amendment bills.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that.
Excuse us. Go ahead. You were in the wrong side.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that bill number 181000, 181002, 180999 as amended, and 181001 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of these bills at the next session of council.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Seeing none, the ayes have it, and the motion carries that Bill 181000, 181002, 180999 as amended, and 181001 as amended be reported out this committee with a favorable recommendation with a rule suspension to permit first reading at our next council session. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Thank you.
You know the guy.